Girl in back of car mouths something. Guys decide to follow. Oscar and John were inseparable. They were best friends and tried doing everything together. So when John got his driver's license, he would drive Oscar around wherever they would hang out. They would play their favorite music over the CD player while they smiled and laughed. They now had the freedom they never had before, but then they stopped at a red light, and their lives changed forever. John Moore was a high school senior. But unlike many of his classmates, he didn't overthink his future. John just wanted to have fun while he was still young. This is why he took every opportunity to go out with his best friend and enjoy life. They would drive everywhere together until, one day, they came across a peculiar sight. One would teach them always to trust their gut. Oscar Davis had a similar mindset to his best friend. He enjoyed nothing more than after-school road trips anywhere. They could be to the public pool, the arcade, or even the grocery store to stock up on snacks. They felt in their element, just as any 17-year-olds would. But with all their driving around, they were bound to encounter trouble sooner or later. The long school day was over. John and Oscar made their way to the student parking lot to get into John's car. They got in and started their journey to John's house, where they could play video games and relax until the evening when John would have to take Oscar home. John and Oscar had been driving on the road for 15 minutes. They expected them to be busy, but oddly enough, they weren't. They had hoped for green lights all the way home. But they had to stop at a red. That's when something caught their eye. There was one other car in the red next to them. They didn't think much of it at first since it was an ordinary car. How often do commuters take the time to even glance at each other? But thankfully, for some reason, Oscar decided to look over at the car. That's when he noticed something very strange. But he'd be glad he took the time to look over. Oscar noticed that there was a young woman in the back of the car. The first thought that crossed his mind was that she was pretty. But soon, he noticed that something was very wrong. The girl in the back wasn't smiling. In fact, she looked distressed. Oscar even saw her lips move. She was mouthing. That's when Oscar's blood ran cold. Oscar quickly looked over at John and told him what he saw. John looked over, too, and stared at the woman. He acknowledged her beauty before noticing the same thing that Oscar did. She didn't look pleased. Maybe the driver had driven poorly. With her in the back seat, they both assumed she was taking an Uber somewhere. But they had to take action when they realized what she was mouthing to them. It wasn't uncommon for people to take an Uber home in this day and age. A lot of people thought it was cheaper than driving. But Oscar felt like there was something wrong with this car. The woman in the back seat didn't look comfortable. In fact, she looked distressed. Oscar's suspicions only got worse when his friend John agreed with him. But the minute she mouthed 2 words to them, they knew they had to call 911. The words the woman mouthed to them were "help me." That's the instant they knew they had to call 911. They decided to follow the car. The girl stared out the back window at them. Now they were sure it was intentional and that she needed help. This was no Uber, but something far worse. Oscar managed to guide the police to where they were. They just hoped they would get there soon enough. After following the car for 20 minutes, it hit a police spike strip and crashed. Oscar and John's hearts sank. But they had no idea what was about to happen. Just as Oscar and John got out of the car, the police surrounded the crash and took the driver out. They placed him in cuffs and checked the woman, who was miraculously unhurt. After being checked, she ran over to the 2 teenagers. She hugged them and thanked them for saving her. It was something she'd remember forever. But John and Oscar didn't do it for the recognition. Everything ended for the best. The young woman's name turned out to be Holly, and she had been kidnapped by the man in her own car. Thankfully, the man faces aggravated kidnapping charges and facing a serious sentence. Holly's mothers thanked her rescuers, and it was a happy ending for everyone even if Holly did have to buy a new car.